Greetings, everyone. It is your girl, Linda Talaferro from the T, the Extra Effort. And yes, my usual favorite time of the month, the first and third Tuesdays, because it is Being Brown at Work Live. And if you missed 2 weeks ago, you've got to catch it on the replay because this woman dropped some gems 2 weeks ago, and she's going to do it again. This fabulous young lady that I have as a guest, and I am so honored to have her for part two. We're going to be talking about what it means to be a workhorse and how you can no longer be one or prevent from being one. But before we get into that discussion, let me reintroduce to some of you and introduce to some of you as well Candace P. Jones, who is a corporate leader and an executive coach specializing in leadership development for Black women in tech. Passionate about empowering individuals and organizations to thrive through change, she brings a unique blend of strategic insight, technical expertise, and a leadership acumen to her work. Her deep commitment to workplace equity is central to her work, recognizing and addressing unique challenges Black women face in their corporate careers. Through her newsletter, Corporate Crowns, Candace fosters a sanctuary where strategy meets soul, delivering straight talking insights to help Black women get their career essentials, or ABCs, which is attribution, belonging, and compensation. Okay, I'm gonna repeat that. Your ABCs: attribution, belonging, and compensation. The newsletter offers exclusive events, coaching strategies, and career resources away from the noise of social media. Welcome back, Candace, to Being Brown at Work.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be back with you today.
Oh my gosh, you're excited. I'm beyond excited because part one was everything I knew it would be when we had our discovery call, and it did not disappoint. So, but for our audience that didn't get a chance to spend time with us on part one, they're going to go back and listen to it after this for sure. But if we could, let's just kind of do a little recap of what we talked about in part one. And really, our focus in that session was around why we're even talking about being a workhorse. What is the why behind it? So, Candace, could you do a little like step back to a couple weeks ago on April 4th when we talked about it wasn't April 4th, but 2 weeks ago. You guys know the math. When we I just realized I said that. I'm like, was that for April? No. When we talked about the purpose behind that, where does this come from? I mean, it's been around for a while. It's not new, right? And it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that we're still talking about it. But what's the root of this workhorse um, mentality or this thing when it comes to Black and Brown women?
Absolutely. So, I think that there are a few contributing factors, right, that we talked about in a bit more detail in our
Yeah.
last chat. But I think that a large theme around it is this country, especially, has a problematic relationship with the labor and talents of Black people that is rooted in slavery, right? And so when you are coming from a history where Black people were property, our talents were for, the benefit,
Yeah.
financial and otherwise, of others, to imagine that all of a sudden there was going to be this overnight direct attribution and compensation and all these things I talk about, right? Those ABCs, that is a
Right.
complete mindset shift that needs to happen. And I think that we're still seeing some of those impacts play out within the modern day workplace. I think another contributing factor is what many of us have heard growing up, which has some truth to it, right? But we hear this message: you have to work twice as hard to get half as far. And so when you're constantly told this message of you need to work a lot in order to be successful, well, you're going to do that, especially when it's
Yeah.
attributed to something that is your identity, which is fixed. I'm going to be Black until I'm just not, right? Like, until, as long as I am, I will be
Right.
Black. And so if I'm given the message that because I am Black, I am going to need to exercise this outsized effort to still get less than what I deserve, then I'm always going to be in this cycle of overwork.
Yes.
I think the last thing that can contribute to this, is also A genuine desire, I think, to have impact, right?
Yes.
And not
Yes.
just, an interracial dynamic, even with intraracial, right? That with Black women,
Yes.
a lot of times we are the fixers. We stand in the gap. And I find this a lot with women that I coach, that these women are dynamic. They are Jills of all trades. They do a
Yes.
lot. They can do a lot. And so a lot of times they will see these gaps and they will feel a sense of ownership to addressing the gaps. And that's where some of it can be self imposed, right? Raising your hand for things. And before you know it, you've raised your hand to everything except for yourself. So, those are some of the things
Mm.
that can contribute
Mm.
to ultimately being this workhorse, being overworked.
Yes.
And I think the last thing we touched on, and I apologize for not bringing this up, but also that many of us don't know the rules of the game. So,
Yes.
when you have not been positioned specifically for advancement in that leadership track, the message that you're going to be given is that your labor translates into your rewards and compensation. For people who are being groomed for leadership tracks, they're told to emphasize things like their relationships, their branding. There are different levers that they are investing in that ultimately put them in that position. But many of us aren't given the game, right? Like we're
No.
either not seen as having that leadership potential because of our identities, or we just simply don't have the networks to say, actually, it's not just labor. It's labor plus
Yes.
relationships plus branding that
Yes.
ultimately get you to this next step. So we're over indexing in the wrong places, thinking it's going to get us to climb the corporate ladder when there are these other elements that other people are investing in, and we simply.
Yes. Candace, everything you said, so spot on. You drop gems and we can't go over them, right? So I'm gonna repeat when you said raising your hand for everything but yourself. That's a gem. If you if you're taking notes, that's a note you need to take. Because I will tell you, speaking from experience, Linda raised her hand a lot with that mentality that, yes, I see the gaps and I believe I have what it takes to bridge the gaps, which I mean, you would think that there shouldn't be anything wrong with that. Unfortunately, then I am that person that is bridging the gap in program management and operational excellence in my past roles. I remember I entered the role in quality and I ended up with three different titles, all
Wow.
under the same, because I kept seeing a gap that I felt like I could bridge. And they was like, okay, cool, Bridget. And I did, right? But it was not to my benefit. But the last thing you just said, I so can relate to, totally relate to, because it is very true that, we do this, thing. And the last point you made was around, state it one more time. The last point you just
Yeah,
made.
basically, like, what are the factors for advancement? And we index on
Exactly.
labor, but not relationships.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. And I wanted to make sure I had that right before I shared my point of view. I can distinctly remember, Candace, when I was given a coach and I was in a role at a company and I was given a coach and it was a white male. I was given an executive coach. And when he said to me, Linda, you're working hard, that's not going to make the difference.
Mhm.
All the work you're doing is never going to matter. They knew you were good at that. That's why you got the job. That's the price of entry. Now you have to get people to know you. Now you have to build. And that was so foreign to me.
Mhm.
Candace, it was so foreign to me. I was in my 30s, right? I'm like, what? It's like, what, people got to get to know me. I got to build relationships. What is that? He said, that's what's going to get you into the exact, that's what's going to get you in the next level. This working hard. And, and I remember one person saying to me, we know you can knock down all the pins. You can get a strike every time. We know that. But to
Mhm.
your point, had I not had that coach that didn't look like me, that knew the rules of the game, I
Yeah.
would not have transcend. So,
Mhm.
but you're so on point, so on point.
Absolutely. And
And I
sometimes it's an
love you.
actual game. I think back to my time in business school, and one thing to their credit, I have to say, is they created a golf clinic for the women. And they said, you need to learn how to golf because as much as we can teach you in this classroom, You need to know how
And,
to
and,
go because that's where a lot of these decisions and these
and
negotiations and these
please
contracts are
share,
going to.
Candace. Where did you go to business school?
uh,
Where'd you go?
I went to Stanford Graduate School of Business.
There we are.
Mhm.
There we are. That's the difference.
Yeah,
You went to Stanford.
yeah,
I went to U of M. That you're right. We find that out in those environments. Those decisions are made on the putting green. There, your girl. I've taken golf lessons. I'm not the best. I will do a scramble in a minute, and I'm saying put me on the putting green. Don't let I ain't don't. I'm not your driver. Don't let me. Mm-mm. But I can do the last shot. Put me
but
because
you
I'm a
can
big
be in the game, right? And it's like the
yes.
literal and figurative game. You got to be in the game, and a lot of times we're not
Yes.
even in the game and we don't realize it.
Oh my gosh, Candace, that was everything. Not even in the game, and we don't realize it. So wonderful. I love how you scope those four areas that have really, unfortunately, substantiated this workhorse environment, right? And some of it we control, and some of it we did not. We, entered into it not by our own choosing, but here's the key, everyone. So we are now going to shift because you can shift this dynamic. It doesn't have to be your reality. Would you not agree, Candace?
I agree.
Doesn't have to be your reality,
It
right?
does. It doesn't.
Yes, doesn't have to be. So from your experience, Candace, let's start peeling back the onion on what the tools and methodologies could be from those people that are listening to this saying, okay, look, I did not only check that one box you come, I checked all four of those. I don't know the network. Nobody told me it didn't take work. I'm this, got this. I'm checking here. I raise my hand all the time, thinking I'm being a team player, thinking I'm doing all of that, Candace and Linda. Help me help myself.
Yeah.
So how would you start, Candace? If you're talking to someone, what would be some of the things, one, two, three, four, however you'd like to
Mhm.
share them with the audience on how they can shift this dynamic for themselves before they
Sure.
end up in total burnout and they're not serving anyone, let alone themselves and their family because they're emotionally drained, stress, anxiety, everything, you know?
Yes, absolutely. So, excuse me.
Yeah, no
I touched
problem.
on this a little bit in our last conversation, so I won't, talk too much about it. But I think the first step is clarity. Being really clear about what your goals are and what are the activities and behaviors and investments that are going to be needed in order for you to reach your goals. If you
Mm.
have that clarity about what your North Star is, the decision making becomes a lot easier. So that's where I will start. If you want to double click on that, go to the last.
Exactly, exactly. Because we talked about last time clarity, right, Candace, is that not everybody wants to get to an executive director, VP. Like you may not want to get there. So that's what Candace shared in the first one. Go back and listen to it because just we're talking about advancement, but if that's not you, that's cool. I mean, get clear about where you want to go. What looks like you for you, not described by someone else, right? But for
Exactly.
you. Okay, wonderful. That's
Exactly. And as you're kind of breaking that apart, there's usually 3 Ps I like to keep in mind when I'm figuring
mm,
out what makes sense being on my plate. There's, pay, right? Money. What is the money that you need to bring in to support yourself and whatever wants you want as well, needs and wants, that's your business. But figuring out what
yes.
you need to do in terms of pay. There's portfolio. What are the types of experiences that you're going
Ooh,
to need to
yes.
forward to the goals that you have? And the last is passion or purpose, right? There are some things that just feed our souls. And I don't want to lose
Mm,
that part of the equation, right? For some of us, that can show up in the professional work that we do. But to really be clear that anything that you're saying yes to, ideally is going to satisfy at least two of those things. And at different points of your life, you're going to index for maybe one of those more than the other. But to look at it from
love
that vantage
that.
point and really determine, does it make sense for me to say yes to this? So that's the clarity piece. The
Love it.
second thing that I would say is prevention is really ideal. If you can prevent yourself from taking on this additional work, that is always the preferred action here. Some of that is what we mentioned earlier. Stop saying yes to everything. Sometimes I tell
Mm.
my coachees, stop being so helpful. That's what I need you to do. Stop being so helpful. You know?
Yes. Oh my God, that's so true.
And
Oh
I
my
get
God.
it. I get it. I am, the oldest daughter in the family my mother was disabled and she was single, right? There is a lot
Mm,
where I am used
mm,
to taking on the load, seeing the gap, plugging it because there were real consequences if that wasn't done.
mm.
However,
Yeah.
comma, I do not need to show up in that way in all spaces. And if I do show up that way in all spaces, there are going to be some real downsides, and I'm going to end up saying no to something in the process. I can't be
Mm,
everywhere.
yes.
I can't be
Can't be
everywhere. I can't.
everyone. Can't be. Cannot
You
be.
can't. You
ca-
can't.
Cannot. Can't be
You can't
everywhere. You
do it.
can't write. You can't be somebody to everybody. No.
You can't. You can't do it.
Oh my
It's
God.
simply not possible. It doesn't work
Yes.
at scale. It doesn't work over time. It is not
Mm.
sustainable. So you've got to be able to say no to some things. And so preventing it in some cases for my clients looks like I've asked them to keep a notepad by their desk when they're in these meetings and they're hearing this discussion unfold and they're like, I could fix that. I know exactly how we would do it. I have a playbook. Write it down, love. You don't have to share that. Stop raising your hand. Write it down. And if you
Write it
still feel
down.
that provoked, that you really just is in your shanda, you just got to do it, then okay. But don't do that immediate reaction where
Immediate.
you're raising your hand for everything. Give yourself space to assess if that makes sense and then volunteer for it. But don't
Oh, I
volunteer by
love it.
default. It will not serve you
Mm,
well, especially if you're in a position where you are usually the fixer. You've got to undo and unlearn
mm.
some of those behaviors. So that's something really
Yes.
specific that I encourage people to do who are prone to volunteering and wanting to
Hmm.
do everything. Write it down first.
I
Give yourself
love that. Ooh, I wish I had known you and you was my coach back in the day. Because I would have look, I would have stopped sitting up in my chair in them conference rooms back in the day, raising my hand. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'd have been like, oh, let me write that down first, get it off my because it's pressing. That's what because it's pressing. So write it down and then go back and think about it. Because
Mhm.
yes, because once you really take time to sit and think through it, do you still really want to do that? Maybe, maybe not.
Mhm.
Right. But like you said, but if it's deep inside here, back to your purpose and your why, then okay, maybe so. Maybe you go back and say, you know what? Hey, I'd like to take that on.
Mhm.
Beautiful advice.
Yeah. And what
Excellent
also
advice. I hope.
happens sometimes when you write it down is that it should be done, but not by me. And that's okay.
Woo!
And so then
And
you
that's
can
okay.
relay that to somebody else or you put the bug in your boss's ear. You know, I think that so and so could really run this thing down. Have you
Really
talked to
good
them
at that.
about it? Then you get the
Mm,
attribution that you had the idea, strategy.
mm.
You're not doing the work. Even better. You know what I mean?
So much
But giving
better.
yourself that gift of time. I really want people to
Yes.
hear this part, because if you're listening in, you are probably in a role where you are making magic happen on the daily. Your brain is sharp. You know how to think through things. In the same way that you exercise that judgment and intentionality and strategy as you are delivering value for your company, do some of that for yourself as well. And thinking about if I have limited resources, time, energy, where is the best place for me to
Yeah.
deploy it? And that means that you aren't always agreeing to things in real time. And that's
Oh
okay.
my
Write it down
gosh.
and then come back to it.
Yes. Oh, oh my God. That's everything. That is everything. That is going to be, I know that's going to be a clip and it's going to get replayed and replayed because that is everything. That is
Yeah.
everything. No, seriously, because we have such the need, and some of it is no disrespect to any of you listening, because I'm gonna raise my both of my hands because I know I was there. We have such a need to prove,
Mm,
to continue to
say it.
prove. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? That we're good, that we're valued, that we're worth it, that we're here. We want to be seen. But okay, so if I solve that massive gap or problem, yeah, oh, they'll see me, they'll work it. We have such the need
Yes.
to prove.
Yes.
And in the
Yes.
process of that, of fulfilling that need on a constant basis, we wear ourselves the heck out. And then does the perception change?
Mm,
Not sure that it does. in
No.
every case,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
you then given that leadership opportunity when it comes just because you have filled the last 6 gaps over the past 5 years? Don't know that you will be the number one considered.
Or have you put
So,
yourself in a position where they think it's a risk for you to be outside of your current role?
girl,
Because that
oh,
happens too, where it's maybe you are eligible, but you're doing so well in this lower role, Imma keep you here because this is more beneficial to me and the business.
Candace,
I'd rather keep you on
say
my team
that.
making me look good than allow you to advance, right? Like,
Oh
you've gotta
my
be thoughtful about these
gosh.
things. You've really gotta be
Yes,
thoughtful about these things and
Candace.
making sure
You
that your
got to
steps
be fully
are moving in a
thoughtful.
way that's going to support you.
That was
It's so
everything right
important.
there. Because they will hold on to you as long as you're making them look good. You
Mhm.
killing that role like that. Why would they let you? Why would they? I can't tell you the number of mentees in my career and the number of people, clients that I've had in my business that have said that exact same thing
Mhm.
that you just said.
Yeah.
That's why
There's
we got to
labels
think it
for it.
through.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
Y'all better
whole
start writing. Look, before you raise your hand, listen to Candace. Write that. You better start. I swear. Woo,
So
you better start writing it down.
so, yeah, so we did that, right? So you wanna prevent it ideally.
Yes.
Um, but let's say that you're in it already. You have some things on your plate. Maybe you're doing an assessment after the fact and you're like, "Oh, I got too much going on. It's not really aligned with where I should be spending my time." Right? And whenever you're recommending a change in the workplace, in your role and responsibilities, I always encourage people to, as much as possible, articulate it in terms of the business impact,
Mm,
business risk,
smart.
business value,
Yes.
rather than individual. And I'm not going to say you're never going to find anybody in your career who cares about you as a person, but
You see, I didn't respond. I didn't say a word.
but ultimately, and I'm gonna put on my business school hat, ultimately the
Mm,
role of the business is to maximize shareholder value.
there you
That's what
go.
is being optimized. And
Bottom
so that is you need
line.
to speak in the language of business when you are approaching these issues. So let's take an example, right? Let's say that you have a bunch of additional tasks on your plate that you're like, I really shouldn't be the person who's doing this. A few ways that you can approach it. I found that proposing maybe if it's something that just simply doesn't need to be done, right? Then make the case. I don't think that this is really creating value for the business. I think we can drop this and in exchange we
Right.
can pursue higher value things. Pretty clear
Right.
cut, right? But let's say it's something that does need to be done, right? Kind of the taking your vitamins for the business. It's not fun work, but somebody's got to do it and unfortunately you the person who keeps doing it. So, one thing that you could potentially do is to propose a rotation, right? Is this something that
Hmm.
can be shared across multiple people? Now, we're not saying this because I don't want to do this anymore. It's been too much work on me. That's not going to resonate. And frankly, it's not going to position you as someone who they're going to consider to be senior,
Yes.
thoughtful. It's
Yes.
just, it
So
doesn't help.
true.
It doesn't
Right.
help. But what you can talk about are the benefits of rotation. One, that means that every person can still execute things within their portfolios, right? No one has an unsized
Right.
responsibility to carry this. Two, when you have multiple people doing things, it tends to spur innovation and continuous improvement. And so you position it in that way where actually I think this is really helpful. And if we have other people who are trying this, I'm sure that we're
Mm.
going to be able to unlock some new insights and approaches that are going to make us that much more effective and efficient.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
while I'm happy to document what I've done so far, X date, I think that we should let Todd give this a try. And I'd love to
Yeah.
see what Todd brings to this. I really enjoyed what he did on X, and I'd love to see what he does with this.
Yes.
Now it's still getting done. You showcase the benefits of it, and you've created an initial blueprint based on what you've already done, where you can say, I've started, now let's build and improve.
Now
Okay.
look at this leader speaking. Hmm. seriously, I mean, that's you come across sounding like a leader, and one that's developed, and also other people are being developed.
Exactly.
Hey,
Exactly.
checks a lot of boxes.
It
And
checks a
to
lot.
your point, it's in the language that they speak and understand. It can resonate. It'll drive them thinking, oh, wait a minute. Candace has a great idea. I think we should rotate that.
Mhm.
I've seen Tony do this. I've seen Melissa over here. Candace, that is genius, girl. Man, see, writing stuff down and rotation ideas. Lord, if I had known that.
Yeah, bring
Ah,
other people in, bring people other people in,
yes.
and depending on what it is, which I think you were also kind of alluding to, it could create opportunities for you then to maybe manage others, coach others, and that's another thing to add
Yes.
to your list of what you've done and the type of impact that you bring, is there is that development of others, right? Now you've
That's
showcased how you're
great.
able to bring people into existing processes and continue to improve it, right?
Oh my
So
God,
there are
this
ways
is
where you can kind of
awesome.
frame this where it can be
This
helpful.
is awesome. Awesome, awesome. Those are all very clear. What I love what you've given, Candace, they're very clear and even tangible, measurable ways that people can prevent from becoming a workhorse, or if they're already there, shift out of it. That might not happen overnight, shifting out of it, but definitely see a progression and more of a positive direction, and then implement some of the preventive type steps that you gave once they're out, right? Once
Yeah,
they're out of it.
yeah, yeah.
Beautiful,
And
beautiful.
then
Before we
just if I could
close for
add
the
one
night,
more
did you have,
thing
please go
that I
ahead.
didn't
Yes,
that I didn't I'll be really quick, I promise.
no
But
worries.
it also can be helpful if you are filling your plate, I'm not saying over, but that you have put enough meaningful work on within your
Mm,
portfolio, right? Where it's then easier to say, well, if I take this on, then this project is going to need to slip. Are you comfortable with that? Right?
mm,
And so there's a combination of both making sure you are on high value strategic work and making
yeah,
sure people are aware of the work that you do. This is something I see time and time again, is that we are not telling the stories effectively of
there
the
we
current
go.
work that we're doing and the impact that it has for the business. And so if people already know that you are running these three major things that mean this for the business, and they've been receiving regular updates about it, it's going to be that much harder for them to bring something to your plate that doesn't seem of that caliber. And so this
Oh,
is also about that
absolutely.
proactive brand building and making sure that people are aware of what you are doing, so there isn't that perception, "Oh, well, she has capacity," right? No, she
Mm,
doesn't have
no,
capacity.
she does
And
not.
then they need to justify why you would take on this additional work in light of everything that everybody knows you're doing, right? Rather than thinking you have extra time or not fully understanding the value of what you're doing already.
Oh my gosh, Candace, that was fun. That's so special because a lot of our challenge most of the time is that we do not communicate what we're working on. We think it's boastful, or we're being told, in our community when growing up, oh, don't be braggy, don't be conceited, don't be, just do the work. No, you need to let people know what
Yeah,
it is
tell
you're working
somebody.
on. You better tell somebody. You better write that narrative. Don't let nobody else write it for you. And I tell people all the time, it is not boastful. Advocating for yourself is, and does not equal to being boastful, conceited, any of that stuff. And to your point, if they don't know, they're going to believe you have capacity and bandwidth. And if you say nothing and take it on, and then you max yourself out, and then you end up not showing up in your excellence as you were, they're not going to be blamed, but you are.
Yes,
So, Candace,
absolutely.
that please, if you're listening to this, every single recommendation she made is extremely critical. But if you are in this right now, one of the things you need to start doing now or tomorrow is making sure that everybody, every key stakeholder knows what value you're bringing to the organization, what projects you're working on, what impact they have. And I love, Candace, how you put where we have to learn how to speak in the language that resonates with everyone, and that is shareholder value. There's not a
Mhm.
company out here, private or public, that, that does not have some type of shareholder value. Private ones have some private equity firm, somebody invested in and wants a return on their investment. Public ones that have IPOs and stock out here, they all want returns on their investment as well. So that is what Candace talked about when she's saying shareholder value. That's what we all, these companies we work for, that's what they all have. That's the language that we need to speak when we're sharing and conversating around recommendations, rotations. Why you want me to work on this versus this? Such critical information. Oh my gosh, Candace, it's been everything.
It was my
It's been
pleasure. Thank
everything
you so much for having
as I
me.
knew it was going to be everything. No, the honor and pleasure and privilege is all mine. Look, if
Mm,
any of you need to connect with Candace, you heard what she does in coaching Black and Brown women. You definitely want to subscribe to her newsletter. You want to get
okay.
involved in those activities. Yes, yes, yes. Connect with her on LinkedIn, DM her, make that connection. It will change your life, just like it did in Being Brown at Work Live. Such a value to have you. Thank you so much, Candace.
Appreciate it. Thank you for letting me spend this time with you. It was my pleasure.
Awesome. Okay.